The Circle of the Hidden Truth. Written and published by Lord Kabura's Magic Haven. The Lost Message. The library was silent, save for the faint sound of brittle pages turning. Dust floated in the dim light filtering through narrow stained-glass windows, casting muted colors onto the stone floor. This was no ordinary library, it was a repository of secrets, hidden deep within a forgotten monastery nestled in the Alps. Its shelves groaned under the weight of ancient manuscripts, their spines cracked with age. Few outside the order even knew the monastery existed, and fewer still had ever crossed its threshold. Dr. Augustine Voss, a historian with a reputation for chasing myths, carefully opened yet another tome. His fingers, smudged with ink and dust, traced the faded text. The words were written in an unfamiliar script, one that whispered of secrets long buried. As he turned another page, he felt something unusual, a hollow echo beneath the parchment. Intrigued, he examined the book's spine and noticed a seam that didn't belong. With a delicate touch, he pried it open, revealing a thin, yellowed parchment folded inside. The parchment was inscribed with symbols and phrases that sent a shiver down Voss's spine. Though the script was fragmented, certain words leapt out: the circle of the hidden truth, forbidden knowledge, alter the fabric of reality. His heart raced as he realized the significance of what he'd found. This wasn't just an artifact, it was a clue, a breadcrumb leading to a secret society whispered about in obscure historical texts but never proven to exist. The circle, he murmured, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. If the legends were true, this society possessed knowledge capable of reshaping humanity's understanding of life itself. Power so vast, it could explain, or unravel, the mysteries of existence. The silence of the library was shattered by a distant clatter. Voss froze, his ears straining. Footsteps, multiple pairs, echoed through the stone corridors. His stomach sank. The monastery was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place untouched by the modern world. Yet now, the sound of boots striking stone grew louder, closer. Before he could act, the heavy oak door burst open. Figures clad in black, their faces obscured by masks, spilled into the room like shadows made flesh. They moved with precision, overturning shelves and scattering manuscripts as they searched. One of them fixed their gaze on Voss. "You have it," the figure growled, their voice cold and mechanical. "Give it to us." Voss clutched the parchment tightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, raising a hand to strike. Before the blow could land, a voice called out from the shadows, "Run!" It was Emil, Voss's young apprentice, standing at the far end of the library. His eyes burned with determination as he held up a leather satchel. Voss understood instantly. Emil had taken the parchment, ensuring its safety. Without hesitation, Voss turned to block the attackers, shouting, "Go, Emil! Protect it with your life!" Emil darted into the labyrinthine corridors of the monastery, his heart pounding as he clutched the satchel. The shouts of the intruders echoed behind him. He knew the monastery better than anyone, having spent years cataloging its hidden nooks and passageways. He slipped into a concealed doorway, leading to a narrow staircase that spiraled downward into the mountain's depths. As he descended, the sounds of pursuit faded, replaced by the thundering of his own heartbeat. He emerged into the cool night air, the monastery looming above him like a dark sentinel. He didn't look back. There was no time for hesitation. With the parchment safely tucked away, he vowed to uncover its secrets and honor his mentor's sacrifice. As he disappeared into the shadows, the world tilted ever so slightly, unknowingly drawn into the web of secrets that had just been set in motion. Dr. Elena Markov sat in her small, dimly lit apartment in Prague, surrounded by the remnants of her once illustrious career. Stacks of books, old manuscripts, and crumpled research notes littered every surface. The faint hum of traffic outside was the only sound in the room, broken occasionally by the groan of a radiator struggling against the winter chill. Elena had once been celebrated as one of the world's foremost linguistics experts, hailed for her groundbreaking work on deciphering ancient, undecoded texts. But that was before the scandal. A single, ill-fated academic paper had tarnished her reputation, reducing her to a cautionary tale whispered among her peers. They'd called her work speculative, unscientific. They'd called her reckless. Her gaze fell on a photograph tucked into the corner of her desk, herself, smiling broadly, alongside a team of colleagues. It was from a time when her passion for uncovering humanity's forgotten languages felt like a noble pursuit rather than a burden. Now, she lived quietly, translating mundane texts for private collectors, far from the academic circles she had once dominated. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She hesitated, visitors were rare. When the knock came again, sharper this time, she stood cautiously and approached. Opening the door revealed nothing but a package, wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with twine. She glanced down the corridor, but it was empty. Curiosity overcame her wariness. Carrying the package to her desk, she unwrapped it carefully. Inside was an old leather satchel, scuffed and stained, bearing the marks of hurried travel. Tucked within was a parchment, yellowed and fragile, covered in strange symbols. A folded note lay on top, written in hurried, almost frantic handwriting. A plea for help. Elena unfolded the note and read. Dr. Markov. I don't know if you remember me, but my name is Emil Voss. I was an apprentice to Dr. Augustine Voss, a name I believe you'll recognize. My mentor is dead, and I am being hunted. What we uncovered in the Alps has put me in grave danger, but I've managed to preserve the most important piece, the parchment enclosed here. It speaks of a secret society, the Circle of the Hidden Truth. My mentor believed this parchment to be the key to their knowledge, but I cannot decipher it alone. You're the only one who can. Please, I beg you, help me uncover its meaning before it's too late. I will contact you soon. Trust no one. Emil. Elena's fingers tightened around the note. The name Augustine Voss was legendary in her field, a pioneer in ancient cryptography. If the younger Voss was reaching out to her, the situation must be dire. She unfolded the parchment and stared at the symbols, her heart pounding. The script was unlike anything she had seen, yet it felt strangely familiar, as if echoes of the language resided in the back of her mind. Angular lines intertwined with sweeping curves, punctuated by strange glyphs that seemed to pulse with meaning just out of reach. She reached for her magnifying glass, studying the markings more closely. Patterns began to emerge, patterns that hinted at a connection to ancient Sumerian texts, though distorted in ways that defied logic. Her excitement was tempered by unease, the symbols carried an almost oppressive weight, as if they were alive with a presence that pressed against her consciousness. As the hours passed, she found herself utterly absorbed in the parchment. She scribbled notes in the margins of a notebook, cross-referencing what little she could discern with her personal library. She felt alive for the first time in months, as though a long-dormant part of her mind had been reawakened. Yet a nagging sense of dread lingered. Emil's plea echoed in her thoughts, trust no one. She jumped at the sound of her phone buzzing. The screen displayed an unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity won out. She answered. Elena Markov, she said cautiously. A voice crackled on the other end. Dr. Markov, it's Emil. Are you alone? Yes, she replied, glancing around the room. What is this about? What have you gotten me into? Keep the parchment hidden, Emil said, his voice urgent. They'll come for it, just as they came for my mentor. The circle doesn't want its secrets uncovered. Who are they? Elena asked, but the line went dead. She set the phone down, her mind racing. Whoever they were, Emil clearly feared them, and now she was caught in the web of whatever shadowy conflict had ensnared him. She glanced at the parchment again, and a thought struck her. If the circle was real, this was no ordinary script. It might be a cipher, a language designed to conceal its meaning from outsiders. But what knowledge was so dangerous that people would kill to protect it? As night fell, Elena locked the parchment and Emil's note in her desk drawer, her nerves fraying under the weight of uncertainty. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, though she knew it was irrational. Outside her window, the snow fell in a silent cascade, blanketing the city in an unnatural stillness. She lit a candle and turned back to her desk, determined to distract herself with other work. But as the flame flickered, a shadow danced across the wall, long, shifting, and unnatural. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Only the emptiness of her apartment. Shaking her head, she muttered to herself, "Get it together, Elena." But the shadow lingered in the back of her mind, as if warning her that the secrets she now pursued came with a price. The first offer. It began the next morning with a knock on the door, sharper and more insistent than the night before. Elena hesitated, her instincts telling her to ignore it. But the knocking continued, growing louder, more forceful. Reluctantly, she opened the door to find two men standing there. Both were dressed impeccably in dark suits, their expressions as neutral as masks. Dr. Markov, the taller of the two said, his voice calm but with an edge that set her on guard. "We've come to discuss a mutual interest." "I'm not interested," Elena replied curtly, moving to close the door. The man raised a hand, his polite smile never wavering. "Perhaps you should reconsider. We're willing to compensate you generously for a certain document in your possession. You'll find our offer more than fair." Elena's heart pounded. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play coy, doctor. The parchment you received, its value is far beyond what you might imagine. Name your price." Her mind raced. These men knew about Emil, about the parchment. If they were offering money, they hadn't yet resorted to violence. That was her only comfort, though a fragile one. "I don't have it," she lied, forcing herself to meet their eyes. "Now, if you'll excuse me." The shorter man stepped forward, his demeanor less polished than his partner's. "You think this is a game?" he hissed. "Hand it over, or things will get—" "Enough," the tall man interrupted, his tone icy. He reached into his pocket and produced a business card, which he placed on the edge of the doorframe. "We'll give you some time to reconsider. When you're ready to be reasonable, call this number." The men left without another word, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, her chest tight. She stared at the card in her hand, its plain design bearing only a name and number: Callahan, Special Acquisitions. Shaken but resolute, Elena turned her attention back to the parchment. She knew she needed answers before her pursuers became more aggressive. With fresh eyes, she studied the symbols again, cross-referencing them against her collection of ancient texts. Patterns began to emerge. Some symbols bore similarities to Sumerian cuneiform, others to Phoenician glyphs. But what startled her most was a motif repeated throughout: an eclipse, often surrounded by intricate swirls resembling solar flares. It wasn't just decoration, it was part of the language, woven into its structure. She scoured her notes for connections and found threads linking the eclipse symbol to historical events. A vanished 13th century sect in southern France, rumored to have worshipped an eternal shadow. A 17th century shipwreck off the coast of Greece, its logs detailing a cargo of blackened sun artifacts. A 1922 archaeological dig in Egypt where an entire team disappeared, leaving behind journals describing a language of forbidden light and shadow. The parchment wasn't just old, it was a roadmap to something that had haunted human history for centuries. Elena knew she couldn't face this alone. She needed someone who could navigate the labyrinth of conspiracy surrounding the circle, someone who wouldn't balk at the dangers involved. There was only one person who fit the bill, though their last meeting hadn't ended well. Liam Carter. A tense reunion. Liam sat in a dingy cafe in the heart of the city, a laptop open before him and his fingers flying over the keyboard. He was a journalist by trade, though his career had been marked by more failures than successes. He specialized in fringe stories, government cover-ups, hidden societies, the kind of stories people dismissed as paranoia. But Liam knew better, there was always a kernel of truth buried beneath the surface. When Elena walked in, his expression shifted from curiosity to surprise, then to something unreadable. "Well, well," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Dr. Markov graces me with her presence. I thought you swore never to talk to me again." "I don't have time for old grudges," Elena replied, sitting across from him. "I need your help." Liam's smirk faded. "If you're here, it's serious. Spill it." Elena pulled the parchment from her bag, her hands trembling slightly. She placed it on the table and watched his face as he studied it. His smirk returned, but this time, it was tinged with genuine interest. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "A contact," Elena replied. "He's on the run, and now I'm being followed too. These symbols," she pointed to the parchment, "they're tied to a secret society called the Circle of the Hidden Truth." Liam's eyes flickered with recognition. "I've heard of them. Barely. Ghost stories, mostly. They're supposed to guard some ancient knowledge. Dangerous stuff." "Dangerous enough for people to kill over it," Elena said. "Liam, I need to know what we're dealing with." He leaned closer, his voice low. "This isn't just a code, Elena. It's a cipher designed to keep people out. If the circle is real, they've hidden their secrets behind layers of misdirection. Deciphering this could take weeks." "I don't have weeks," Elena replied. "And neither do you, if they think you're helping me." Liam sighed, rubbing his temples. "Fine. But you owe me. Big." As they left the cafe, a black car idling across the street caught Elena's eye. The driver didn't get out, but she could feel his gaze following them. She nudged Liam, who glanced over his shoulder and cursed under his breath. "We've got company," he muttered. "Come on." They ducked into an alley, weaving through narrow streets and dodging pedestrians. The car crept after them, its tires hissing against the wet pavement. Liam led her into a labyrinth of side streets until they finally emerged onto a bustling square. "For now, we blend," Liam said, pulling Elena into the crowd. "But they're not going to stop. If you want to solve this, we need to stay one step ahead." Elena nodded, clutching the parchment tightly. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back. Chapter 3, A Circle in the Shadows. The Journey to France. Elena leaned back against the creaking train seat, her thoughts as restless as the rhythmic clatter of wheels against the tracks. The map fragment Liam had unearthed from his network of sources, a piece supposedly tied to the circle, pointed to the ruins of an old chapel in rural France. Known locally as La Chapelle des Ombres, the chapel had fallen into disrepair centuries ago, its history swallowed by time. Yet whispers of its connection to the circle persisted in the journals of explorers, the diaries of monks, and cryptic mentions in apocryphal texts. Liam, sitting across from her with his laptop balanced precariously on his knees, scrolled through blurry photographs and grainy scans of documents. "This place," he said, gesturing at the screen, "has been at the center of some weird stories. Travelers disappearing, villagers reporting strange lights at night. One guy in the 1950s swore he heard voices chanting in Latin when he visited the ruins." Elena raised an eyebrow. "And you think that's credible?" "Credible enough to check out," Liam replied with a smirk. "Besides, you're the one chasing the circle." She looked down at the parchment tucked in her bag. Its cryptic symbols and haunting aura seemed to weigh heavier with every passing mile. La Chapelle des Ombres. The chapel stood in a field of tall grass, its skeletal remains silhouetted against the evening sky. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood. Vines climbed what was left of the stone walls, their gnarled roots burrowing into the cracks like claws. "This is cheerful," Liam quipped as they approached the crumbling structure. "Let's focus," Elena said, adjusting the strap of her satchel. She shone her flashlight through the broken doorway, the beam illuminating a space that felt frozen in time. Faded murals of saints and angels adorned the walls, though their faces had been worn away by centuries of neglect. A broken altar lay at the center of the room, its surface scorched and cracked. "Doesn't look like much," Liam muttered, but Elena's eyes were already drawn to a carving near the altar. She knelt down, brushing away layers of dirt to reveal a symbol, a familiar one. An eclipse, surrounded by the same swirling patterns she had seen on the parchment. "This is it," she whispered, her voice tinged with awe. "This place is connected to the circle." Liam joined her, inspecting the symbol. "Looks like a dead end to me." Elena ignored him, her fingers tracing the grooves of the carving. Something about it felt off. She pressed her palm against the stone, and a faint click echoed through the chapel. A section of the floor shifted, revealing a narrow compartment beneath the altar. "Still think it's a dead end," she said, smirking as she reached into the hidden space. From the compartment, she pulled out a small, weathered box. Its hinges creaked as she opened it, revealing a fragment of a map, its edges burned and its surface marked with more of the cryptic symbols. Alongside it was a slip of parchment bearing a phrase written in jagged handwriting. "Truth lies not in what is seen, but in what is concealed." Elena read the phrase aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a clue." "It's cryptic," Liam corrected. "Could mean anything. Or nothing." She shook her head. "It's deliberate. The circle doesn't waste words. This means something." As they studied the map fragment, Liam pulled out his laptop, searching for any historical references to the chapel and the phrase they had found. He frowned as he pieced together fragments of information. "This place wasn't just a chapel," he said. "It was part of a network of safe havens used by a group of monks during the 14th century. They were rumored to be protecting some kind of forbidden knowledge, something so dangerous that the church branded them heretics." "And the circle?" Elena asked. "There are mentions of an unnamed society that supposedly absorbed the monks after the chapel fell," Liam replied. "The stories vary, but the theme's the same, a group of people dedicated to hiding the truth. The kind of truth that could change everything." Elena's pulse quickened. "The truth lies not in what is seen, but in what is concealed," she repeated, her mind racing. What if this phrase isn't just a riddle? What if it's the circle's philosophy? "Maybe," Liam said. "But what's the map for?" Elena held the fragment closer, her eyes scanning its faint markings. It wasn't just a map, it was a guide to something buried, hidden. A location tied to the circle's secrets. But where? The fragment alone wasn't enough to say. As they packed up their findings, the sense of unease that had lingered since their arrival deepened. The air seemed colder, the shadows inside the chapel darker. Liam noticed it first, a faint glint of light outside the broken window, like the reflection of a lens. "We're not alone," he said, his voice low. Elena followed his gaze and saw it too. A figure moved through the tall grass, their silhouette just visible against the moonlight. Then another figure emerged, and another. "Time to go," Liam whispered, grabbing his laptop and shoving it into his bag. They slipped out through a side entrance, keeping low as they navigated the ruins. The figures moved closer, their steps deliberate, their intent clear. Whoever they weren't here by coincidence. Elena's heart pounded as they darted into the trees surrounding the chapel. She clutched the map fragment tightly, her mind racing. Whoever these people were, they wanted the same thing she and Liam were after, and they weren't going to ask nicely. As they fled into the night, Elena glanced back toward the chapel. For a brief moment, she thought she saw one of the figures standing in the doorway, watching them. The figure didn't move, but its presence sent a chill down her spine. "We can't stop," Liam said, pulling her forward. If they know what we have, they'll never stop coming. Elena nodded, gripping the map fragment as though her life depended on it. Then we'll make sure they never catch us. Chapter 4, The Cipher. Elena and Liam sat in a small, dimly lit motel room miles away from the chapel, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The fragment of the map and the symbols on the parchment lay spread across the table. Liam hunched over his laptop, muttering as he cross-referenced online resources, while Elena meticulously sketched connections between the symbols and historical references in her notebook. The phrase found in the chapel, "Truth lies not in what is seen, but in what is concealed," kept replaying in her mind. It wasn't just a philosophical statement, it was a directive. "This map isn't a map in the traditional sense," she said, breaking the silence. "It's a cipher, a layered code designed to obscure something bigger." Liam glanced up. "You're saying the map doesn't show a single location?" "It's fragmented intentionally," Elena replied. "Look here, these glyphs aren't landmarks, they're coordinates. But they're meaningless without context." She picked up the parchment and placed it over the map fragment. The symbols aligned in places, forming faint patterns that resembled constellations. "It's not what we're looking at, it's how we're looking at it," she murmured. After hours of trial and error, Elena and Liam uncovered a sequence hidden in the alignment of the map fragment and the parchment symbols. The symbols pointed to 3 distinct locations, each marked by an eclipse glyph accompanied by local references. Rome, Italy. The map highlighted a section of the ancient catacombs beneath the city, a network of tunnels infamous for its historical and religious significance. India. The coordinates aligned with a forested region in Kerala, known for its sacred trees and ancient rituals. Mexico. The final location pointed to an area near the ruins of a Mayan temple, deep in the Yucatan Peninsula. Each location was marked with a cryptic subtext, "Entry to the Veiled Path." "This is incredible," Liam said, staring at the map. 3 sites spread across the globe, all tied to the circle. "But why 3? "I think these sites are keys," Elena said. "Or pieces of one key. The circle isn't guarding just knowledge. They're guarding something physical, something hidden in parts to prevent anyone from reaching it easily. And we're going to piece it together?" Liam asked, raising an eyebrow. "We don't have a choice," Elena replied. "The circle's secrets might be dangerous, but whoever's chasing us isn't going to stop. If we get to these locations first, maybe we can gain some leverage." Location 1, the Labyrinth in Rome. The first location on their list was Rome, a city steeped in history and mystery. The catacombs were a sprawling maze beneath the streets, originally used for burials and later rumored to house secret rites. Elena and Liam arrived under the cover of night, armed with a crudely drawn map of the catacombs. They bribed a caretaker for access to a rarely visited section, descending into the damp, musty tunnels armed with flashlights and their instincts. The walls of the catacombs bore faded inscriptions and symbols, but none matched the glyphs on the parchment. They wandered for hours, the oppressive silence broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. "Wait," Elena said, stopping abruptly. She shone her flashlight on a faint carving of an eclipse near a hidden alcove. Below it was a phrase in Latin, "Quaerit, inveniat, he who seeks, shall find." She pressed her hand against the carving, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a small chamber. Inside, they found an ornate box containing a fragment of a disc, its surface inscribed with the same swirling patterns as the map and parchment. "One down," Liam said, pocketing the fragment. 2 to go. Location 2, the sacred tree in India. The second location brought them to the dense forests of Kerala, India. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of earth and greenery filled their senses. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the kalpavriksha, a mythical sacred tree said to grant wishes. Guided by the coordinates, they ventured deep into the forest, eventually coming across a massive banyan tree whose roots twisted and coiled like serpents. At its base, they found carvings similar to the ones in Rome. Elena noticed a hollow among the roots and reached inside, her fingers brushing against a cold metallic object. She pulled out another fragment of the disc, identical to the one found in the catacombs. As she examined it, the wind picked up, carrying with it a faint whisper, voices speaking a language neither of them could understand. They didn't linger long, sensing that the forest itself wanted them gone. Location 3, the Mayan Temple in Mexico. Their final destination was the Yucatan Peninsula, where ancient Mayan ruins rose like sentinels from the jungle. The temple marked on the map was less visited than its famous counterparts, overgrown with vines and shrouded in mystery. They climbed the crumbling steps of the temple, their progress slowed by the oppressive heat. At the summit, they found a stone altar adorned with eclipse carvings. A shaft of light pierced through a crack in the temple roof, illuminating a hidden compartment. Inside was the third and final fragment of the disc. Elena pieced the fragments together, forming a complete artifact, a circular disc with intricate patterns radiating from its center. As the pieces clicked into place, the disc began to hum faintly, its surface glowing with an otherworldly light. "This is it," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The key to the veiled path." Their relief was short-lived. As they descended the temple, they saw figures waiting at the base, armed and shadowed. The same people who had pursued them from the chapel. "We've got company," Liam muttered. "What now?" "We keep moving," Elena replied, clutching the disc tightly. "The circle's secrets are within reach, and I'm not stopping now." Chapter 5, The First Trial, The Catacombs of Rome. Descent into darkness. Elena adjusted her flashlight as the musty air of the catacombs enveloped her. The narrow staircase spiraled downward, the temperature dropping with each step. Liam followed close behind, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder and a crowbar tucked into his belt. "Why does everything have to feel like a horror movie?" he muttered, his voice bouncing off the stone walls. Elena smirked, though her grip on the flashlight tightened. "If it makes you feel better, ancient burial sites aren't exactly known for being welcoming." At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a long corridor lined with alcoves. Bones were stacked neatly within them, the skulls staring out like silent sentinels. Latin inscriptions adorned the walls, many of them prayers for the dead, though others were far less comforting. They followed the crude map Liam had procured, navigating deeper into the labyrinth. The carved paths were a maze, designed to disorient intruders. The further they went, the fewer markers they found, until the silence was interrupted only by their own footsteps and the occasional drip of water. "There," Elena said, shining her light on a faint carving near the floor. It was the eclipse symbol, surrounded by swirling patterns identical to those on the parchment. "This is it." Beneath the symbol was a riddle in Latin, which Elena translated aloud. "Light reveals, yet shadows speak. What lies hidden seeks the seeker. Turn back, or face what dwells within." Liam frowned. Why do ancient societies always feel the need to be cryptic? "It's a warning," Elena replied. "But we're not turning back." She examined the carving and pressed her hand against it. A grinding sound filled the air as a section of the wall shifted, revealing a narrow passage. Beyond it, darkness beckoned. The passage led to a chamber unlike anything they'd seen before. The walls were covered in frescoes depicting scenes of eclipses, their fiery patterns illuminating the shadows cast by Elena's flashlight. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which lay a stone tablet inscribed with more symbols. "It's beautiful," Elena murmured, stepping forward. "Careful," Liam warned. "This feels too easy." The moment Elena touched the tablet, the floor rumbled. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing hidden mechanisms, ancient stone traps with swinging blades, shifting walls, and spikes emerging from the floor. "Too easy." Elena shot back, dodging a blade that narrowly missed her shoulder. "You had to say it." As the room began to shift and collapse, Elena focused on the tablet. The symbols formed a pattern she recognized, a code embedded within the swirling eclipse glyphs. It's a sequence, she shouted over the noise. The patterns correspond to the symbols on the parchment. Great, Liam said, dodging a falling stone. Solve it faster. Elena worked quickly, pressing the symbols on the pedestal in the correct order. The rune shook violently, but as the final symbol clicked into place, the mechanism stopped. The air grew still, and a hidden compartment opened at the base of the pedestal. Inside was an ornate key, its surface engraved with the same intricate symbols they had been chasing. Their victory was short-lived. As they exited the chamber, they found their path blocked by several figures cloaked in black. Their leader stepped forward, his face obscured by a mask resembling an eclipse. Hand over the key, he demanded, his voice cold and commanding. Liam instinctively stepped in front of Elena. You'll have to kill us first. That can be arranged, the masked man replied, motioning for his associates to close in. Elena clutched the key tightly, her mind racing. The narrow corridors of the catacombs offered no easy escape, and their pursuers were well prepared. Liam, this way, she shouted, pulling him into a side tunnel. The Veil Society gave chase, their footsteps echoing through the darkness. Elena and Liam wove through the maze, relying on their memory of the map to stay ahead. At one point, they ducked into an alcove, holding their breaths as their pursuers ran past. This is insane, Liam whispered, his face pale. You wanted adventure, Elena replied, her grip tightening on the key. Welcome to it. The sound of voices grew distant as they navigated deeper into the catacombs, emerging near a forgotten exit hidden beneath a pile of rubble. Liam used his crowbar to pry open the hatch, and they climbed into the open air, gasping as they were greeted by the cool night breeze. Next time, we're bringing backup, Liam muttered, collapsing onto the ground. Elena held up the key, its metallic surface glinting in the moonlight. We have what we came for. That's all that matters. Yeah, Liam said, glancing nervously back at the hidden entrance. But they'll be back. And they won't stop. Elena nodded, tucking the key into her bag. Then we keep moving. This was only the first trial, and there's more to come. Chapter 6. Secrets in the Forest. Arrival in Kerala. The oppressive heat of the Indian forest enveloped Elena and Liam as they stepped off the rickety bus. The village at the edge of the forest was a cluster of thatched huts and narrow dirt paths, its air thick with the scent of earth and blooming flowers. Children played near a well, while older villagers glanced at the newcomers with curiosity tinged with suspicion. We're definitely not blending in, Liam muttered, adjusting the strap of his bag. Just stay calm, Elena replied, scanning their surroundings. She held the parchment tightly, its decoded coordinates pointing to a spot deep within the forest where the legendary Kalpavriksha, the sacred wish-granting tree, was said to stand. As they moved further into the village, an elderly man approached them, his lined face framed by a long white beard. His eyes lingered on the bag slung over Elena's shoulder. You seek the sacred tree, he said in heavily accented English, his voice firm but not unkind. Elena hesitated before nodding. Yes. We believe it may hold something of great importance. The man frowned. Many have come before you, chasing what should remain hidden. Few return. We don't have a choice, Elena said, her tone resolute. Please, can you take us there? The man studied them for a long moment before gesturing for them to follow. If the tree wills it, you will find what you seek. But be warned, the truth it guards is not kind. The journey through the forest was arduous. Towering banyan trees formed a natural canopy, their roots snaking across the forest floor like veins. Birds chirped in the distance, their songs interrupted by the occasional rustling of leaves. After hours of trekking, they arrived at a clearing bathed in an ethereal light. At its center stood the Kalpavriksha, its massive trunk twisted and gnarled with age. Its roots spread outward in every direction, creating an intricate web that seemed to pulse faintly, as though alive. A group of monks in saffron robes sat in a circle around the tree, their heads bowed in meditation. The elderly guide motioned for Elena and Liam to wait as he approached the monks and whispered to one of them. After a brief exchange, the monk stood and walked toward Elena. His eyes were sharp, piercing, as though they could see straight into her thoughts. "You come seeking the circle," he said, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "We're looking for a key," Elena replied. "Something connected to their secrets." The monk frowned. "The circle's secrets are not meant for the unworthy. What you seek lies beneath the tree, but it is guarded. The truth you uncover may not set you free, it may bind you to its burden." Liam stepped forward. "What exactly are we talking about here?" The monk ignored him, turning back to Elena. "If you proceed, understand this, knowledge can be a double-edged sword. The truth you uncover may shatter the foundations of your reality." Elena met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "We've come too far to turn back now." The monk sighed and motioned toward the tree. "Then enter, if you can. The hidden chamber." Elena and Liam circled the tree, searching for an entry point. At its base, among the tangled roots, Elena spotted a faint carving of an eclipse. She pressed her hand against it, and the ground beneath them shifted. A section of the roots parted, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward. "Here we go again," Liam muttered, pulling out his flashlight. They descended into the darkness, the air growing cooler with each step. The staircase led to a small chamber carved from stone, its walls covered in inscriptions similar to those in the Roman catacombs. At the center of the room was a pedestal, upon which lay a second key, its design identical to the one they had retrieved in Rome. Elena reached for the key, but as her fingers brushed its surface, the walls around them came alive. The inscriptions glowed faintly, and a voice echoed through the chamber, not a human voice, but something deeper, resonating in their minds. "To those who seek the circle's truth, beware. The knowledge you uncover is a blade that cuts both ways. With it, you may reshape the world, or unravel it." The glowing inscriptions began to form images, a shadow eclipsing the sun, civilizations rising and falling, and a figure standing at the center of it all, wielding the knowledge like a weapon. Elena's breath caught. "This isn't just history," she whispered. "It's a warning." Liam stepped closer, his eyes wide as the images shifted. "Are they saying this knowledge can destroy everything?" Elena nodded, her fingers tightening around the key. "Or give someone the power to control it." As the light dimmed, the voice faded, leaving them in silence. Elena slipped the key into her bag, her mind racing. Whatever the circle was protecting, it wasn't just knowledge, it was something capable of reshaping the very fabric of existence. When they emerged from the chamber, the monks were waiting. The one who had spoken to them earlier approached, his expression grave. "You have taken the key," he said. "Your path is set, and the burden is yours to bear. But know this, others will seek what you now possess, and they will stop at nothing to claim it." Elena nodded. "We'll be ready." The monk held her gaze for a long moment before stepping aside. "Go, then. But remember, the truth is not always a gift." As they left the clearing, Elena felt the weight of the key in her bag. The monk's words echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside. There was no turning back. "We need to move quickly," she said. "Mexico is next." Liam nodded, but his eyes flicked to the shadows at the edge of the forest. "Let's just hope we get there before they do." Elena followed his gaze and froze. In the distance, partially obscured by the trees, she saw them, figures dressed in black, their faces hidden. The Veil Society had found them again. "Run," she whispered. And they did, the sacred forest bearing witness to a chase that would carry them closer to the heart of the circle's secrets. Chapter 7, The Final Piece. Arrival at the Mayan Temple. The jungle buzzed with life as Elena and Liam approached the ruins of the Mayan temple. The humid air was thick with the scent of earth and vegetation, and the dense canopy overhead filtered the sunlight into golden streaks that danced across the ancient stone. The temple rose before them, a crumbling pyramid of limestone overrun by vines, its steep steps leading to a small, weathered shrine at the top. "This has to be it," Elena said, clutching the 2 keys they had recovered. "The coordinates match perfectly." Liam, his face pale from exhaustion and tension, gave her a faint nod. "Let's just hope we're not walking into another ambush." The memory of the Vale Society pursuing them in India was still fresh. They had barely escaped with their lives, and now the shadows of the jungle felt alive, as though unseen eyes watched their every move. The base of the temple was covered in carvings, glyphs and symbols that mirrored those on the parchment and the keys. Elena scanned the inscriptions, running her fingers over the worn stone. The Mayan language was unfamiliar, but the patterns told a story. At the center of the carvings was an eclipse, surrounded by depictions of figures kneeling before the sun and the shadow. "It's another riddle," Elena murmured. Her eyes landed on a series of symbols directly beneath the eclipse. She studied them, cross-referencing them with the parchment. 3 lights converge to reveal the path. The shadow knows, but the light confirms. She turned to Liam. "We need to place the keys." "They're the lights." Liam held up the first 2 keys. "Where?" Elena examined the carvings again, finding 3 shallow recesses in the stone, each shaped to match the key's intricate designs. She slotted the first key into place, then the second. The temple rumbled faintly, the air vibrating with an unearthly hum. "The 3rd piece will complete it," she said. "It has to be up there." She pointed to the shrine at the temple's peak. As they climbed the steep steps, the jungle erupted in chaos. Gunfire shattered the stillness, and shouts echoed from below. Elena turned to see a group of armed figures emerging from the undergrowth, the Vale Society. "Go!" Liam shouted, drawing a small handgun he had acquired in their travels. "I'll hold them off." "Liam, no!" Elena cried, but he was already moving back down the steps, firing to slow their pursuers. Elena hesitated, torn, but Liam's voice rang out again. "Go! Finish this!" Heart pounding, she continued upward, every step feeling heavier than the last. The shouts and gunfire faded as she reached the shrine, but not before she heard Liam's cry of pain. The final key. The shrine was a small chamber, its walls adorned with more eclipse glyphs. At the center stood a pedestal, atop which lay the 3rd key. Its design was identical to the others, its surface etched with swirling patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Elena picked it up, her hands trembling. As she held it, the pedestal sank into the ground, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was another inscription, this one written in a language that seemed to pulse with meaning. She didn't need to translate it, the words resonated in her mind. "The nexus of truth lies where the lights converge. Unite them, and the path shall be revealed." The 3 keys were the answer. Together, they would guide her to the circle's meeting place, the nexus of truth. Elena tucked the key into her bag and descended the steps, dread tightening her chest. At the base of the temple, she found Liam slumped against the stone, his shirt stained with blood. "Liam!" She dropped to her knees beside him, tears pricking her eyes. "You're going to be okay. I'll get you out of here." Liam gave her a weak smile. "You, always were the stubborn one." He winced, his voice strained. "Did you find it?" "I did," Elena said, her voice breaking. "We have everything we need." "Good," Liam murmured, his eyes fluttering shut. "No, no, no," Elena said, shaking him gently. "Stay with me." The jungle stirred around them, and the sounds of their pursuers grew louder. With trembling hands, Elena pressed her scarf against Liam's wound, doing her best to stem the bleeding. She couldn't lose him, not after everything they'd been through. As she worked to stabilize Liam, a faint glow emanated from her bag. She glanced inside and saw the 3 keys, their patterns illuminated, as though reacting to one another. She pulled them out, arranging them in the air. The keys aligned perfectly, forming a triangular symbol with the eclipse at its center. A beam of light shot from the keys, pointing westward, cutting through the dense jungle canopy like a beacon. "The Nexus," Elena whispered. Liam stirred, his voice barely audible. "You have to finish it. Don't let them win." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. She would find the Nexus of Truth, no matter the cost. But first, she had to save Liam and get them out of the jungle alive. As the light faded, the Veil Society emerged at the edge of the clearing, their weapons raised. Elena hoisted Liam onto her shoulder, determination etched into her face. "You want the keys?" she muttered. "You'll have to catch me first." With Liam's life hanging by a thread and the truth of the circle within reach, Elena plunged into the jungle, the glow of the keys lighting her path toward the Nexus of Truth, and the ultimate revelation. Chapter 8, The Circle Revealed. The Journey to the Island. The small seaplane cut through the misty Atlantic skies, the horizon an endless expanse of gray and blue. Elena stared out the window, the 3 keys resting in her lap. Beside her, Liam was pale but stable, his wound hastily treated in a remote village en route to their destination. The pilot, a gruff man with few words, had been bribed to take them to the uncharted coordinates revealed by the keys. "How much longer?" Liam asked, his voice weak but determined. "Not far," the pilot replied, his gaze fixed on the compass as though steering toward a ghost. Elena squeezed Liam's hand. "You should rest." He gave her a faint smile. "Not a chance. I didn't come this far to miss the grand finale." As the island came into view, Elena felt a strange pull in her chest. It was a jagged mass of rock and greenery, crowned with mist and surrounded by turbulent waves. At its center stood a massive structure, its silhouette indistinct but undeniably ancient. The pilot dropped them on a rocky shore, refusing to wait. "This place has a reputation," he said, revving the engine. "I'll be gone before the sun sets." Elena and Liam climbed the narrow path leading inland. The air grew heavy, as though laden with an unseen energy. The structure they had glimpsed from the plane came into focus, a towering sanctuary carved directly into the cliffs, its architecture unlike anything Elena had seen before. Columns of black stone rose toward the sky, etched with glyphs that seemed to shift and shimmer when viewed from different angles. "This is it," Elena whispered, awe and trepidation mingling in her voice. "The Circle's sanctuary." They stepped through a massive archway into the sanctuary's main chamber. The space was vast, its walls lined with shelves that held ancient texts, artifacts, and devices whose purposes were a mystery. Strange machines hummed softly, their designs blending the aesthetics of ancient and futuristic technology. Elena's eyes widened as she took in the array of objects. They shouldn't exist. This is technology thousands of years ahead of its time. Liam leaned against a pillar for support, his gaze sweeping the room. "And those artifacts," he said, pointing to a pedestal displaying a gleaming obsidian orb. "Some of this stuff looks Mayan, Egyptian, even Sumerian." "It's like a repository of human history," Elena said. "Or something beyond it." In the center of the chamber was a dais, its surface inscribed with a massive eclipse glyph. Elena instinctively stepped toward it, placing the 3 keys into corresponding slots. The room trembled as the keys clicked into place, and a beam of light shot upward, illuminating the domed ceiling. As the light faded, figures stepped from the shadows. Dressed in flowing robes of deep indigo and gold, their faces were partially obscured by intricate masks depicting celestial symbols. Their presence was both imposing and otherworldly. One figure, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His mask bore the symbol of the eclipse, and his voice carried an unearthly resonance. "You have found your way here," he said. Few have. Fewer still are permitted to leave. Elena swallowed hard. You're the circle. We are its stewards, the figure replied. For centuries, we have safeguarded knowledge too powerful to be left in the hands of the unworthy. What you see here is but a fraction of what we protect. The masked figure gestured to the sanctuary around them. This is the nexus of truth. It is both a repository and a refuge, a place where the wisdom of countless civilizations is preserved. Elena's voice trembled with both awe and defiance. Why hide it? This knowledge could change the world. And that is precisely why it is hidden, the figure said. The truths contained here are not gifts, they are burdens. In the wrong hands, they would shatter the balance of existence. Another member of the circle stepped forward, their voice softer but no less commanding. What you seek is not forbidden because it is dangerous. It is dangerous because it reveals the fragility of the world you know. The circle led them deeper into the sanctuary, where they stopped before a massive circular portal. Its surface shimmered like liquid light, and faint images danced across it, scenes of civilizations rising and falling, of wars waged over knowledge, of peace born from ignorance. This is the threshold of truth, the leader explained. Beyond it lies the full understanding of the universe, its origins, its purpose, and its potential futures. To step through is to see reality unfiltered, to bear the weight of knowing. Elena felt a surge of longing and fear. And if I choose not to? The leader's voice was calm. Then you leave here as you came, with fragments of knowledge but without the burden of its totality. The choice is yours. Before Elena could respond, Liam staggered forward, his face pale but resolute. We didn't come all this way to turn back, he said. If there's even a chance this knowledge can make a difference, we have to try. Elena hesitated, torn between her curiosity and the warnings she had received. Finally, she stepped forward, placing her hand on the shimmering portal. Images flooded her mind, visions of worlds beyond imagination, of truths that defied comprehension. She saw the interconnectedness of all life, the delicate threads that held the universe together, and the terrible power of unbridled knowledge. She staggered back, gasping. The circle leader steadied her. Now you understand why we guard this knowledge. Before she could respond, an explosion rocked the sanctuary. The Veil Society had found them, their shadowy figures pouring into the chamber. Gunfire and chaos erupted as the circle's guardians moved to defend the nexus. Take the keys, the circle leader shouted, pressing the now glowing artifacts into Elena's hands. You must protect them. Elena and Liam fled through a hidden passage as the sanctuary erupted into violence. The glow of the keys illuminated their path as they raced toward the surface, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. As they emerged into the open air, Elena looked back at the sanctuary, now engulfed in fire and shadow. The keys in her hands pulsed faintly, their light guiding her toward an uncertain future. Liam leaned against her for support, his voice barely audible. So, what now? Elena's eyes burned with determination. We finish what we started. The truth is out there, and it's not going to stay hidden forever. Chapter 9, The Cost of Knowing. In a quiet chamber deep within the sanctuary, Elena sat across from the circle's leader. The keys, now faintly glowing, rested on the table between them. Liam had been taken to a safe room to recover, leaving Elena alone with the weight of what she had seen. You have proven your resolve, the leader said, his mask shimmering faintly in the torchlight. Few make it this far. Fewer still understand what they truly seek. Elena's hands clenched into fists. What I seek is the truth. I've risked everything to find it. And yet the truth is not a reward, the leader replied. It is a burden. You now stand at a crossroads, Dr. Markov. We offer you a place among us, to become a guardian of the knowledge you have touched. But this path is not without sacrifice. Elena frowned. What kind of sacrifice? The leader gestured to the keys. The knowledge we protect is not merely academic. It is the foundation of existence itself. To fully comprehend it is to see the threads that bind life and consciousness. Such understanding changes you. It isolates you from the world you once knew. And it carries a terrible risk. The leader took one of the keys and placed it on a pedestal in the center of the room. A beam of light erupted from its surface, projecting a swirling pattern of symbols and images onto the walls. This, he said, is what your parchment began to uncover, a fragment of the primal truth. It is the foundation upon which all life is built. Elena stared in awe as the images shifted. She saw shapes and patterns that seemed alive, pulsating with energy. Symbols evolved into living forms, flowing into galaxies, stars, and worlds. The images carried meaning that transcended language, a visceral understanding of creation and connection. It is not knowledge alone, the leader continued. It is the truth of consciousness itself. Every thought, every emotion, every bond, woven into the fabric of existence. To wield it is to hold the power of creation and destruction in your hands. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. This is what the circle protects. Yes, the leader said. And this is why it must remain hidden. For every seeker like you, there are those who would twist this knowledge for their own ends. The Veil Society is but one example. A thunderous explosion rocked the sanctuary, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling, and distant shouts echoed down the corridors. The leader's calm demeanor turned steely. They've breached the gates. Elena stood, her heart racing. The Veil Society? The leader nodded. They seek to harness the primal truth for power. They would unravel the fabric of reality itself to reshape it in their image. Before Elena could respond, a guardian burst into the room. The society is advancing toward the nexus. We've secured the remaining artifacts, but they're overwhelming our defenses. The leader turned to Elena. You must decide now. Will you join us and protect the truth, or will you walk away and leave this knowledge behind? Elena hesitated, the words of the leader echoing in her mind. The images of the primal truth still danced across the walls, beckoning her with both wonder and terror. To understand it fully was to see the world for what it truly was, but it also meant shouldering a responsibility that could never be undone. Elena's voice faltered. If I join you, what happens to Liam? To my life outside of this? You will leave it behind, the leader said. The truth will consume you, as it has all who guard it. But your work will ensure that humanity remains safe from those who would misuse it. And if I walk away? Elena asked. The leader's voice softened. Then you will forget much of what you have learned here. You will return to your life, unchanged but unburdened. The choice is yours. Elena closed her eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. But before she could speak, the chamber door burst open. Members of the Veil Society stormed in, their weapons drawn. The leader and the guardians moved swiftly, engaging them in battle. Elena ducked behind the pedestal, clutching the keys tightly. A masked figure pointed a gun at her. Hand over the keys, he shouted. Elena's mind raced. The keys were the only way to access the full power of the primal truth. If the Veil Society took them, the consequences would be catastrophic. Without thinking, she grabbed the glowing artifacts and sprinted toward the far exit. Elena found herself in a vast expanse of white, where there was no up or down, no horizon, just an infinite void. Before her floated an orb of light, pulsing with the energy of the keys and the symbols she had followed. As she approached, the orb shifted, its surface reflecting images of her own memories, fears, and aspirations. A voice resonated, not with sound but with understanding. You seek the truth. Are you prepared to see it? Yes, Elena said, her voice trembling but resolute. The orb expanded, enveloping her in its light. Images flooded her mind: humanity's history, its triumphs and tragedies, the rise and fall of civilizations. She saw the interconnectedness of all life, the threads that bound every being to the fabric of the universe. And she understood, the truth was not a single answer but a mirror, reflecting humanity's deepest fears and highest aspirations. The voice spoke again. This knowledge is neither a weapon nor salvation. It is a reflection of those who wield it. What humanity does with the truth defines the future. The vision shattered as Elena was pulled back to reality by Liam's voice. Elena. They're here. The Veil Society emerged from the jungle, weapons raised. Their leader stepped forward, his mask glinting in the light of the portal. Hand over the keys, he demanded, his voice cold. The truth belongs to those who have the strength to use it. Elena stepped in front of the pedestal, shielding the portal. You don't understand. The truth isn't what you think it is. It's not a weapon, it's a choice. The leader sneered. Spare me your philosophy. That power will reshape the world, and we will control it. Liam moved beside her, his face pale but determined. You're not taking it. The leader raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the portal flared, its energy erupting in a wave that knocked everyone to the ground. The voice returned, resonating across the clearing. The truth cannot be taken. It must be chosen. Elena rose to her feet, her eyes fixed on the glowing keys. The choice was clear: preserve the truth and risk it falling into the wrong hands, or destroy it to protect humanity from itself. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, but the revelation still burned in her mind. The truth was a mirror, reflecting humanity's potential for both greatness and destruction. You don't have to do this, Liam said, his voice soft. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Elena turned to the leader of the Veil Society, who was struggling to rise. You think the truth will give you power, she said. But power without understanding is destruction. She reached for the keys, their glow intensifying. For a moment, she hesitated, her mind racing through the possibilities. Finally, she whispered, the truth doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone. Elena placed her hands on the keys and turned them together. The portal's light grew blinding, its energy filling the clearing. The pedestal trembled, and the keys dissolved into beams of light that shot into the sky. The portal collapsed inward, its energy dissipating. The nexus was gone, its secrets locked away once more. The clearing fell silent, the tension breaking like a wave. The Veil Society's leader stared at her in shock. What have you done? I've preserved it, Elena said, her voice steady. The truth is still out there, but it's not ours to control. As the Veil Society retreated, defeated, Elena and Liam sat on the edge of the clearing, the jungle around them alive with the sounds of nature. The weight of the journey settled over them, but so did a sense of peace. What now? Liam asked. Elena looked at the horizon, the sky tinged with the colors of dawn. We move forward. The truth is still out there, waiting for humanity to be ready. But for now, we've done our part. Back in her small apartment in Prague, Elena sat at her desk, a blank notebook before her. She picked up a pen and began to write, her words flowing easily. The truth is not an answer. It is a mirror, reflecting who we are and who we could become. It is not a gift or a curse, it is a choice. She paused, her gaze drifting to the window, where the morning sun broke through the clouds. A faint smile crossed her lips. The journey was over, but the truth story was just beginning. A quiet life. The sun hung low over the hills, casting a golden glow across the quiet village where Elena had made her home. Her small cottage stood at the edge of a meadow, surrounded by fields of wildflowers and the occasional sound of distant church bells. It was a far cry from the chaos and danger of her past life, yet echoes of those days lingered in the corners of her mind. She sat on the porch with a cup of tea, a worn leather journal in her lap. Its pages were filled with her notes, reflections, and sketches of the symbols that had once consumed her. The journal was her way of preserving what she could of the truth without exposing it, a personal record of a journey that had forever changed her. Years had passed since she turned the keys in the nexus, sealing the primal truth away from both the circle and the veil society. She had left behind the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, knowing the burden it carried. Yet the revelations she had glimpsed remained vivid, shaping how she saw the world. The truth is not a weapon, she thought, tracing her fingers over the journal's cover. It's a mirror, a reflection of our fears and hopes, our strengths and flaws. It's not the world that needs to change, but the people who live in it. Liam had stayed with her for a time, recovering from his injuries. They had talked often about their journey, about the choices they had made and what they might have done differently. But eventually, he had moved on, finding a new purpose in advocacy journalism. Occasionally, she received postcards from him, cryptic notes hinting at his latest investigations. He always signed them the same way, "Keep looking up." Elena's thoughts drifted to the circle. She had wondered often what had become of the guardians who had dedicated their lives to protecting the primal truth. Had they rebuilt their sanctuary, hidden themselves even deeper, or scattered into the world to await a new generation of seekers? A subtle movement in the meadow caught her eye, a figure in a long coat walking slowly through the tall grass. For a moment, her heart quickened. She set down her tea and stood, watching as the figure approached. But when they reached the fence, they simply placed a small package on the gatepost before turning and disappearing into the evening light. Elena walked to the gate and picked up the package. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, sealed with wax bearing the emblem of an eclipse. Inside was a single piece of parchment, inscribed with a familiar phrase. "The truth lies not in what is seen, but in what is concealed." Beneath it was a note written in a firm, elegant hand. "The circle endures. Humanity's time will come." Elena folded the note carefully and placed it back in the package. As she returned to the porch, she felt a strange sense of peace. The truth she had glimpsed was not gone, it was merely waiting, held in trust for a future when humanity might be ready to embrace it without fear or greed. She opened her journal to a blank page and began to write. Truth is a seed planted in the soil of uncertainty. It grows only when tended by hands willing to nurture it, not harvest it for themselves. One day, the time will come when we are ready to see it bloom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena set down her pen and leaned back in her chair, watching as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. Somewhere, she knew, the circle continued its work, watching, waiting, and guarding the legacy of the truth. And in her heart, she felt certain that when the time came, humanity would be ready.